Hi guys, how's it going? How you doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I'm doing my next palette review in my palette roulette series here on my channel every single Monday, in which I bring you a review on a palette that I have in my collection that you might also have in your collection. It's not about the next bright best thing out there on the market. It's just solidly about getting use out of the products in my collection and getting familiar with the almost 200 palettes that I have, and I hope that you're in for it. Today we actually have two that we're going over. For those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna. So happy that you've found your way to our channel here, where we go over all things high-end, colorful beauty and self-care. We do dabble in a little bit of drugstore, but not much if I am honest, and I just kind of like to give you all the education that I receive in my position as a district leader for Ulta Beauty and chat about makeup. Like literally that is what we do here, is just a lot of chit chat about makeup. I do hope that you find that this is a channel that soothes your soul as much as it soothes mine, and that you'll want to subscribe before you go. And with that said, let's roll into this palette review. All right, so we actually have two palettes to go over today. The two palettes that we're going over today are actually the Flower Beauty Jungle Lights palette, which is a drugstore palette, and then the Coloured Raine Vivid Pigments palette. This is an indie palette, and I don't typically buy drugstore and I don't typically buy indie because it's super hard to like return indie. It's super hard to get indie, but these palettes, well, the Flower Beauty one is like a cult favorite for shimmers, and I cannot say that I wonder why, because it's actually pretty good. Spoiler. Let's dig into these palettes. I'm going to take them one at a time, much like I have the last three videos, because we do have two palettes. There's a lot to go over and I just kind of want to jump in, and it's easier to do it one palette at a time. So the first palette that we're going to look at today is the Flower Beauty Jungle Lights palette. This is a drugstore palette. It is, however, $17.99, so it's kind of on that upper echelon version of a drugstore palette. This cosmetics company is the one that was built and created by Drew Barrymore, and Drew Barrymore has my heart ever since ET when I was young, so I have some like fascination with her beauty line specifically, but much because of the nostalgia piece to it, not because anything really draws my attention. I do think that for the most part, the packaging of this beauty brand is really pretty, really quite aesthetically pleasing, and I would purchase multiple products. I mean, their powder, I want to purchase their powder just because of the container that it's in, but I don't wear powder, so we have talked ourselves out of that. The packaging on this palette, however, is not as aesthetically pleasing as it could be. As you can see, it is just a plastic container with a clear plastic top. It does have palm fronds, right? Is that what they're called? Palm fronds on the front of it, and it says Jungle Lights, and you can see the shades in this palette. And then on the back of it, it does give you some indication of what's in the palette. It also tells you what the name of the palette is, the name of the shades, and then what it was inspired by and how to best use it, and blah blah blah, right? Yes, that is what the back of it is. Just a sticker. The whole contraption is plastic. I will tell you that this is a very fragile palette, and the reason why I say that is because as I was looking up star rating on the multiple websites that it is, you know, purchased from, the amount of one-star reviews kind of really shocked me. And then when I went down and looked at those one-star reviews, every single one of them was about how fragile this palette is. From personal experience, I did order it from Ulta Beauty. I will put that haul in the cards, because I did talk in that about the fact that this palette came to me with one of the shadows, this purple one here, completely shattered all over inside the palette, all over inside the box. There was enough of the one shade left that I could like push it together and formulate a new pan of shadow for that palette. Otherwise, I probably would have returned the palette and said, I need a new one. But from what I can gather from those one-star reviews, it happens every single time this palette is sent. So with that said, don't travel with this palette. And by all means, if you can get it in person, absolutely pick it up in person if this is what you are looking to pick up. So this palette does have 21 grams of product in it, or 0.7 ounces, which means each one of these 6 pans in here has 0.12 ounces of product in it. It does have a 4.3 star rating on Ulta with 222 reviews, a 4.8 star rating on Flower Beauty with 140 reviews, a 4.3 star rating on Google with over 700 reviews, and then a 3.2 star rating on Amazon with 63 reviews. And that is where I found the most 1-star reviews. It has 6 bold, creamy, beautiful shimmer colors in it. And these are intense shimmers. You guys can see them on my lid today. I do have these two over here on my lid today, and they're stunning. They're beautiful. They're easy to use. These are infused with micro pearls, which is supposed to help you get that really bold, beautiful, intense shimmer without all of the fallout. And I find that if you apply these in the way they're intended to be applied, you do find yourself having far less fallout than you do if you're trying to apply it with a brush. So with that said, these are intended to be used with your finger, swiped on with your finger, patted on with your finger, and they do work really, really well in that fashion. As a matter of fact, they work the best they can in that fashion. They also work with a brush that is wet, but they work the best with your finger. They do pick up on a brush, but not a dry brush. If you're going to use a brush with it, you need to use a densely packed brush, and it needs to be a wet, densely packed brush. They are beautiful. They are very emollient. They are very creamy to the touch, and they blend really super well. I do have the gold blended up into the red in the eye look today, and I found that I didn't have any problems with these working well with each other. They do, layer on each other quite nicely. I also didn't find that I had any problems trying to blend them in with matte shadows or any other shadow that I tried to place with it. You could blend the mattes into them, but you could also blend them into the mattes pretty perfectly. And these performed with or without primer almost the same exact way, and they had a real long, lengthy wear time that doesn't exist with a whole lot of shimmers, honestly, to this extent. Like this intense, this beautiful, lasted about 10 plus hours. I did, only wear my makeup for a good, 10 hours this week. I don't think I wore it any longer than 10 hours this week, but I do know that every single time I went in to take my makeup off, the shimmer that existed in my eye look still looked like I had just freshly applied it. With that said, let's look at the shades in here. So I'm just gonna do all 6 of them all at the same time. Again, these are really emollient. They feel really nice in your finger or on your finger as you're swatching them. They feel like putty almost. The first one we have is this one, and it is called Amazon. It's a rich golden bronze shade. I quite like this shade actually. It has just enough orange in it that it doesn't feel super gold to me, and I'm not a fan of gold. So then we have this one, which is called Anaconda. It is a lush green, kind of sagey, kind of army colored, beautiful green. This is like my perfect shade of green, if I have to be honest. Then we have Tiger Lily, which is a kind of red tone, new copper penny looking copper. It honestly would go really, really well with the eye look that I have on today, but I thought it was too one-noted. And then we have this one here, which is called Paradise. This is the champagne shade in the palette. I felt like it and Amazon kind of blended into each other to almost become one in an eye look, which both are on my eyes today, and I don't know that you would know that both are on my eyes today. And then we have Wild, which is this guy here. And this is a blackened plum. And this one is the one that broke all over. And if I am reading the 1-star reviews accurately, I would say that that is the one that everyone else also struggled with not being fragile. All the rest of them stayed pretty well intact during that whole process and feel really creamy in the pan. And then the last one is this guy here, which is called Wild, and it is a lavender mauve shade, and it is stunning. That one and the green were probably my two favorite to play with in this palette. They're both just so pretty. There's no like duochrominess to them. I mean, you're straight up gonna get what it advertises that you're gonna get. I think that they're beautiful though. The blackened plum one doesn't appear super shiny. That one I would say was my absolute least favorite to play with. The champagne I thought was pretty, but I didn't think it was like a standout shade. The other four are just stunning. Like I could do with the other four shades and not the champagne or the purple because I didn't find that they spoke well to the palette. With that said, I do think that these are beautiful shimmers and I will keep them in my collection. I did love this palette, really enjoyed playing with it, and I think that these shimmers are really unique to my collection. This one specifically, I don't think I have another shimmer this color. And I don't think that I have any that feel quite like these ones do and perform quite like these ones do. And I would also say that because of their creamy nature, like I was a little bit terrified that they were going to kind of exacerbate texture or create texture on my eye, but they didn't at all. They were beautiful from the minute I put them on to the minute I took them off. I really didn't have any kind of opportunities that I could pinpoint with these shadows specifically. This is a beautiful shimmer palette. This green, I really love this green. So it's that perfect combination of sage and army that kind of mixes together. But green's my favorite color, so maybe I'm just biased. So there's that. I'm going to wipe these off and then we're going to talk about the Vivid Pigments palette. All right, so this is the Coloured Raine Vivid Pigments palette. This is Vivid Pigments and Shadows is what it says on it. This palette does come in at a little higher price point. This is $50 for 16 eyeshadows. And currently right now it's on sale on the Coloured Raine website for $30. So now is the time, if you have ever had this in your mindset to purchase, now is the time to purchase it because it's still for sale. As far as I know, it didn't have a like email me when in stock. It wasn't out of stock. And it does come in at $30 at the time I'm filming this. It does have 16 shadows in them with 0.06 ounces per pan, which means this palette has a total of 24 grams or 0.84 ounces for the 16 shadows in it. You have this beautiful yellow backed cardboard packaging, and it does have like shiny like paint splatters, I think, on the palette. It is a rather pretty palette in my mind. And then the back looks the same as far as the motif, and then it just has information on the palette and about the palette. It does say on the back the directions for use. It also says that there are several shades that are not intended for use around the immediate eye area. This is, of course, one of the FDA guidelines for, you know, many pigments have dyes in them that the FDA has told us that are not okay for the eye area. That is the US FDA. Every other country, their eyes are totally fine. They can use these colors. The US says no, and there are 8 shadows of these 16, so about half the palette not intended for eye use. The baseline for this is that those tend to cause some kind of irritation or staining on your eye. I will tell you I did not have any irritation. Even the eye look that I have got on today has 2 of those shadows on my eye look, and I don't have any irritation that is anywhere different than what my regular wonky eye irritation is in the first place. But these shadows do cause a lot of staining. Like underneath this orange wing or red wing is a beautiful pink wing left over from yesterday's cut crease eye look. So there's that. This is what the inside of the palette looks like. It does have a really nice mirror. I love the packaging of this. However, the magnet on it is not a really great magnet. So this is another one that you maybe don't want to travel with unless it's really secure in a makeup bag, you know, and held closed by the items around it, because you may find that the palette will open up and the product might get a little bit scuffed in travel. With that said, they're pretty hard pressed, so I don't see it falling apart. I do see it getting scuffed if the magnet opens up, which is potentially a problem. The mirror is a really nice mirror. It's a beautiful full-size mirror, and it does have a nice film on the top of it when you purchase it, and it does fold all the way back on itself, which I like because it makes it easier to hold the palette, in my opinion, if you're using it. So this is a nice like rainbow palette, right? These are both pressed pigments and straight up eyeshadows for all of the colors of the rainbow and then some. So it's basically your primary colors, your secondary colors, and then there are some tertiary colors in there as well. I think it's a beautiful palette, honestly, and I love that it is built in the way that it is, with all the purples, all the blues, and then the green and orange tones mixed with the pink tones. I think it's beautiful the way it's arranged. This does come in at a 4.9 star rating on the Coloured Raine website with 137 reviews, and that's the only star rating that I could find for this. It is indie. That is the only website that sells it, unless you look at like Beauty Bay or maybe even Beautylish might have it. I didn't look at those websites, so I have no idea. This is cruelty-free and vegan. I had read somewhere that there was a couple shades in here that were not vegan, but I don't see that anywhere on here. So I mean, I'm not sure about that entirely. You'll have to do your research if vegan is what you're looking for, because I had heard that some of the shadows on here are not vegan. All of them are matte. They are a wee bit on the dry side because of the pigment nature of them, but they are so blendable. For pressed pigments, they are so blendable. Most pressed pigments are really kind of grippy in the pan as well, and I don't find that to be true for these shadows. I found them to be really silky, really smooth, really nice and easy to the touch. And I think that that helped create like the blendability that they have because they're not grippy. There wasn't any amount of voiding that I noticed. There was some patchiness that could occur with these three down here and even like this one here if you went in too heavy-handed at first. So really building up these shadows to the intensity that you want them to be is going to be of utmost importance. Like truly just barely dip in, tap off, and build the shadow instead of just going up in with straight up pigment is going to be the utmost potential for these shadows. I would also say that if you don't stay, you know, where you need to in the color wheel, these will get muddy very fast. There was a green and like brown eye look that I did, and it turned out so awful. I took pictures of it, but it is awful. So then I tried to put some yellow on top of it, and it looked just worse. So I'll put all those pictures in here because I did take those pictures, but it was not good. It was not a good eye look. It got very muddy really fast. I tried to blend it out too much. I think there's a real happy medium with pressed pigments sometimes that you have to stay in for blending just enough, blending not enough, and blending way too much. So there's that. It performs really well on a dry eye. It also performs really well on a dry primer, but it doesn't perform super awesome on a wet or tacky primer because the pigment will just stick immediately where you set it and you have a harder time blending it. So I went in with the Ulta Beauty matte eyeshadow primer and didn't have any problems with it. I also went in with the NYX Milk eyeshadow crayon. Didn't have any problems with it, but when I tried to use like my MAC paint pot or my Beauty Crop pot eye primer, it did not love that. So they are, because they're so dry, they are pretty dusty in the pan, but that doesn't really translate on your face. I didn't have a whole lot of fallout with this eyeshadow palette, to be honest, which was actually kind of shocking. I think that they're very hard pressed and very dry, and because they're very hard pressed and very dry, you're gonna see a lot of that dustiness in the pan, but not really does that translate onto your face. I know that this used to be sold, these pressed pigments or these vivid pigments used to be sold as singles, And when they put them into this palette, there was a lot of word on the street that they weren't as good here, but I did some research and I found some swatches, and if I can remember, I'll put them up here. I think it was by Talia, but it might be by another like small like blog spot kind of girl that was trying to like compare the singles that she had in her collection to these. And from what I can gather from both of the websites that I looked at, the singles don't perform any differently than the ones in this palette do. So that warmed my heart, because I remember looking at these when they were sold in singles, and very shortly after I started looking at Coloured Raine and started seeing these Vivid Pigment singles, they started putting them into this palette. The one thing that a lot of people also didn't like about the fact that this palette existed and the singles no longer did was that you couldn't buy them at $6.99 a piece and just get the colors that you wanted. You had to pay $50 and get 16. So there are, you know, hits and misses with buying a palette versus a single. Some people are just palette people and some people are just single people. I'm glad that they came in to a palette, because I don't know that I'd use them as often with them being single shadows. However, the single shadow like magnetic palette that they used to sell for them looked very much like this magnetic palette does. But you guys can see this magnet is not fantastic. It's not a great magnet. I don't know why it's such a shitty magnet, if I'm honest. So all four in this row are pressed pigments that are not okay for eye use. And all three of these shadows actually make up my eye look today. So earlier when I said 2 of them are in my eye look, 3 of them actually are in my eye look. And all 4 of these are considered those pressed pigments that aren't okay for your eye use. These 4, or these 8 in the center, are. I know that there's 4 blues in this palette, and that's been a point of contingency for a lot of people too, but each one of these blues is a very different blue and shows up as a very different blue in your eye look as well. I would say that the gradient on here is no different than this gradient, although you can see this gradient a lot better. So let's do some swatches. I would also like to say that I feel like this palette has a great longevity as well. I think that it lasted just as long on my eyes without significant fading at all to speak of. Well, too, that 10-hour mindset, like I don't know how much longer it would last, because I don't think all week have my makeup on any longer than 10 hours in a day. There's that. So the first one here, and I'm just going straight across the rows, is Sauce. This actually is a really red matte, even though it looks kind of like a burnt orange brown in the palette. It's definitely very, very red. Then we have this one, which is Unbothered. It is a really nice, like, I would say peachy flesh tone color. It was a really great like transition tone. Then we have Party Drip, or I'm sorry, Drip Drop. Drip Drop was a very nice like pale blue, almost bright, like bright baby blue shadow. And then we have Bossed Up. Bossed Up is a really pretty lavender. This one is one of the pigments. So pigments don't typically swatch super, super great. So just saying, like, some of these I'm gonna have to go over twice. I did go over that one twice. And they do stain. You can see that all 4 of those shadows have stained my fingers, and only 2 of them are considered pigments for the sake of, you know, staining. So it's not just the pigments that do the staining. The next 4 are Party Drip, which is a beautiful like hot pink. Then we have Lemon Drop, which is the most pigmented yellow I have in my collection for sure. That looks like a yellow. I would say that this one performed best over a white base. Otherwise it kind of lost a lot of that vibrancy, but such a beautiful yellow. Then we have Jet Set, which performed much like a periwinkle in an eye look. It is just a really pretty like dusty blue, but it definitely looked very periwinkle in an eye look. And then we have Cute, which is the lavender. I think it's important to see that even the yellow stains, you guys, these shadows are really, really dang pigmented, and they really, really are amazing to work with. If you're opposed to staining, this is not going to be the palette for you because every color in this palette stains, even the more subdued colors. If you want to call them subdued, I don't think they're by any means subdued shades. So then we have Crushin', which is kind of like a hot orange. It looks very like peachy in the pan, but it's definitely more of like a hot orange shadow. Then we have Level Up, which is your primary green. Then we have Neo Blue, which I feel like is that neon blue shade, almost like a royal blue though too. And then we have this purple, which I'm actually going to swatch twice because that is #1 in Pinky Swatch, but that is also one of the pigments. This one is called Vibes. It's just a really pretty, just basic purple. All right, the last four are kind of like a brighter or deeper version of those four that we have down already. So we have this one here, which is called Splash, and it is a really bright tangerine orange shadow. Then we have this one here, which is called Squad, and it is kind of like a tealy evergreen. It does have a little bit of blue tendencies, so it goes really well with the blues in this palette as well. Then we have this one, which is kind of a navy, and it is called Yacht Life. Then we have this one, which is called Perp Smurf, and it is that darker purple. I do not believe that Vibes and Perp Smurf needed to be in this palette together. I feel like the two purples look very, very similar in an eye look. Unlike the blues, which you can definitely see the gradient in the blues in this palette, and there are 4 in this palette, so that's a good thing. I don't think the two purples you can see as big of a difference in your eye look when it comes to those two shades in the same eye look. I mean, it's got a really nice thought process behind it. I feel like you're getting some bright tones. I feel like you're getting some darker tones. And I know that you're getting some great transition shades. That one right there is the best transition shade in this palette, but some of them work really well too, just dependent on what you're doing with the colors that you're going after. I think that this is a pretty great rainbow palette if you're going for rainbow, because you're gonna get the darker tones, you're gonna get the secondary and sometimes tertiary tones of the same colors that you're going after, and you don't find that a whole lot in the rainbow palettes, right? I don't think I struggled with it, but I do know that there are some shadows in here that could have operated a whole lot better, and I would have been a whole lot more happy with them. These 3 specifically could have been different formulations and made easier to apply and get what you wanted to out of them. They did tend to get a little bit patchy if you went in way too heavy with your hand, which I already mentioned. I do think that these 2 lighter tones also had that same kind of consistency where if you went in too ham to begin with and didn't build it up and weren't patient, then you could get some patchiness with those 2 lighter tones as well. The rest of them I think performed fantastic. This one was a surprise for me because even though it shows up very red in the camera, in person at sight it looks more like almost a terracotta color, so I actually anticipated it being a little more orange than it ended up being. It is in my eye look today, and I think that it's perfect in my eye look today as that red, but this is the second time that I've used this. So had I went into that shade expecting a different color today, I might be irritated that it didn't show up well in my eye look. Again, those stain, they all stain. You guys, you're going to find yourself different colored. And if you don't like that, then this is not the palette for you. Wonderful palette. Again, I will keep it in my collection. I'm really glad I picked this up. I feel like this one I got along with a lot better than Juicy Boost for whatever reason. I do feel like the formula is the same. With that said, it will stay in my collection. I did have a good time with it. The longevity of both of these palettes was really, really decent for me. I find that if I put them on at 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, that they're going to last my entire workday, and that's a plus for me. I also like that they worked with or without a primer on my eye to the same level of performance that they did with a primer on my eye. You just have to kind of negotiate which primer you're going to use, especially with the pigments. Because if you're using a wet tacky primer, these pigments are going to stick in place. So, and give you more grief than what you want. I'm going to go wash my hands, pick a new palette, and I will be right back. Okay, so going into next week, I've been thinking a lot about all the little minis in my collection, the little 4 pans or 6 pans, or like even things like my singles and whatnot. And I know that I've brought my singles in to play before, but I've never really done these kind of things before. So this week I am going to be looking at my melt stacks, and I actually have 2 stacks here. I have the gunmetal stack, and then I also have the Love Struck stack. So I'm going to be working with these guys, and I am also going to be working with the Too Faced Razzle Dazzle Berry eyeshadow palette. I think that they'll all go together well. This is the Razzle Dazzle Berry. It's very like purples, and it's got some of the mattes that I think I'm really going to miss by just using these 2 stacks. This is the Love Struck stack, and it is really pretty. The purple and the peachy tone, which I just stuck my fingernail into, are the shimmers, I do believe, in the palette, and then the last 2 are the mattes, and then this one is almost all shimmers, and it is just this last one here, or just this last one here that is a matte. These other 3 are shimmers. So I do think that these will pair very well with what is offered in the Razzle Dazzle palette, because it's got some of those lighter tones that I might need, and specifically in the matte eyeshadow realms. At first, when I first came into the beauty space, like these melt stacks were, every single one of them was on my list, but they cost as much as the palettes do, and there's only 4 shadows in them. So I did get these guys on sale. I want to say I paid half of what they cost, or maybe even less than half of what they cost, when Melt started filtering out the stacks and what they were doing with their eyeshadow thought process. I got these relatively cheap anyways, and these are the 2 that really spoke to me. So I'm excited to use these. We've kind of got some reds and peaches. We kind of got some grungy like blacks and whites, and then we've got some purples. So I do think that it's all going to come together quite nicely, and I am interested in trying them, interested in seeing how I feel about the stacks after using Melt palettes, and also interested to try another Too Faced palette that, man, I don't have very much Too Faced in my collection because they're just not super consistent in my opinion. So, but they have typically done really well with their like collections like this. So that is all I have for you today. I do hope that you enjoyed the video, and I hope that if you did, you're considering giving it a big thumbs up. I also hope that you're considering sticking around, subscribing before you go. And if you do all that, please hit that notification bell, because it's going to notify you every single time I upload a video, and I do upload 3 times a week. So I would love to have you along for this crazy ride of mine, welcome you into my YouTube fam. If you do that, please let me know down in the comment section so I can welcome you personally. I thank all of you for coming. I hope that 2022 is treating you all kindly so far. I hope that you and yours are healthy, and you're safe, and you're staying mentally stable in this crazy world that we're living in right now as best as you can. And I hope that you're all loving each other, but loving each other from afar. And until next time, bye friends.